On January 12, 1888, warm air from the Caribbean met cold air from Canada, creating a fast-moving blizzard with winds reaching 80 miles per hour and temperatures plunging to -40 Fahrenheit. The storms crossed the American plains from the Dakotas all the way down to Texas, compounding the devastation. The morning began with unusually high temperatures, leading many children to go to school without their winter clothes, and in many places, the storm hit without warning, just as those same children were returning home. The resulting tragedy is now known as the Children's Blizzard. In August 1883, 6 years before the blizzard, in Indonesia, a volcano named Krakatoa erupted. Krakatoa erupted with enough force that it was heard 3,000 miles away. The sound was so loud in Mauritius that it was thought to be cannon fire. The pressure wave from the explosion radiated outwards at speeds greater than 675 miles per hour. The pressure wave was recorded by barographs worldwide multiple times. It rounded the globe 3.5 times. The energy that was released was 4 times the Tsar bomb, the largest hydrogen bomb ever detonated. The explosion from this volcano is estimated to be the loudest sound in known history, reaching 180 decibels. The blast launched ash 50 miles into the sky that spread around the Earth by high-altitude winds, causing the sky to appear red, as depicted by many artists of the time. This high-altitude dust also caused light from the sun to be partially blocked, resulting in a 6-year cold spell known as the Little Ice Age. The beginning of the Little Ice Age is marked by the eruption of Krakatoa. The end is marked by a tragic storm that crossed through the American Midwest, resulting in at least 235 deaths, making it the world's 10th deadliest winter storm on record. But the real tragedy is that the worst of the storm blew through the Midwest just as thousands of children were being released from school. The Midwest at this time was booming with new settlers making their way to open country to start new lives. The small towns were growing faster than they ever had, and houses, buildings, and especially schoolhouses were being hastily erected. Many schoolhouses were erected without care and without any form of insulation. They were simply wooden shacks for children to spend the day in under the supervision of their teachers while their parents were working. Many of the people that traveled to the Midwest in search of new lives were immigrants that were not prepared for the harsh conditions of the plains in winter. They were busy setting up their new lives while they sent their children off to school. It should also be noted that students at this time were no older than 14 years old. In fact, most of the teachers were only 16 to 20 years old. These young teachers had the fate of all of their students' lives in their hands. The morning of January 12, 1888 was beautiful. The last couple of weeks had been dreadful, with bone-chilling temperatures and the last 6 years that had been marked by the Little Ice Age. Over the last few weeks, many of the people across the plains had been kept in their houses out of the bone-chilling cold and away from the winds that were sweeping across the plains. This morning was a chance for everyone to get out, replenish their supplies, and go about their work in the fields. It was also a chance for the children to get back to school. For the past few weeks, the children had been kept out of school because of the temperatures and the drab conditions of the schoolhouses. As the families left their homes for the day, the temperatures in Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, and across the plains were unseasonably warm for January. The temperatures were in the 50s and even the 60s in parts. The children went to school and the parents went to work in no more than long sleeves and pants, expecting a wonderful day. A Norwegian immigrant named Knut Knutson went out for supplies to stock up his home in Rushmore, Minnesota. In Pawnee City, Nebraska, schoolteacher Seymour Dopp welcomed his 17 students for a day full of learning and fun. In Plainview, Nebraska, Loie Royce had 3 children in her one-room schoolhouse, and another teacher in Nebraska, Minnie Freeman, had a few children in her one-room schoolhouse. All were out early on this beautiful warm morning, ready for an uneventful school day in the beautiful weather. However, none of the people throughout the Midwest plains could have been prepared for what was coming. The storm formed to the north in southern Alberta and Saskatchewan on January 8th and quickly swept south across Montana, Wyoming, and into Colorado. It was early to mid-afternoon on January 8th when the storm met warm winds sweeping north from the Caribbean. The energy from the south combined with the cold winds from the north to create a blizzard that had never been seen across the plains before, and no one knew it was coming. The Army Signal Corps had chosen not to issue a cold warning across the Midwest. As they knew the two storms were coming, they did not realize the severity of the meeting between the northern front and the southern front. As the storm approached, the people reported an eerie calm just before instant blizzard-like conditions. The temperatures dropped instantly, and the high winds pelted people with ice, not coming down from the skies, but sideways blown by the wind. People's eyes were frozen shut almost instantly. Those that could still see could only see a couple of paces in front of them. In some places, people reported pure blackout conditions, while visibility was mere inches. The conditions went from nice, moderate temperatures to unsurvivable in a matter of minutes. Anyone caught out in the storm had only minutes to find shelter, which was near impossible with the visibility reduced to zero. The temperature in some locations dropped to 40 degrees below zero in a matter of hours. Some locations reported a 100-degree temperature drop in just 24 hours, and the winds blew at 60 to 80 miles per hour. The impact of the storm was felt instantly as the storm rolled through just as school was letting out, catching thousands of children walking home in the blizzard, and also leaving mid to late teenage teachers with the responsibility of making life or death decisions for these children. These young teachers had to decide if it was best to keep the children in the shabby schoolhouses that were not built for shelter, or if they should venture out into the storm to try and find shelter elsewhere. These were life and death decisions that must be made immediately without time to think. Some made the correct decision, some didn't, and some had no choice at all. When the blizzard hit Rushmore, Minnesota, Newt Knutson had not yet returned home from the store. His wife, Cecilia, worried and not understanding the severity of the storm, tried to make the trek to the store to find him. After just a few paces outside, she became lost and disoriented and took shelter under a sled. She was found the next day, frozen, just 40 paces from her front door. In a similar event, Hanley Countryman of Alexandria, Minnesota, had also gone to the store for supplies. He was on his way back home when the blizzard hit suddenly. Again, he was blinded and disoriented by the blizzard and didn't know which way to go. He froze to death only 150 yards from his home. The storm swept across to the hills of South Dakota and the plains of Iowa and Nebraska just before students were released from school. Children in Great Plains, South Dakota were trapped inside their schoolhouse. Two brave men ventured out into the blizzard, tying a rope between a schoolhouse and shelter. The two men traveled back and forth along the line, leading the trapped children to safety. Back in Pawnee City, Nebraska, school teacher Seymour Dobb and his 17 students were trapped in their poorly built schoolhouse. Knowing that the children's parents would be worried, but with no other options, Mr. Dopp kept the children in the schoolhouse. Luckily, they had extra wood and were in good condition to ride out the storm. He burned the extra wood to keep the children warm throughout the night. All students survived as their families trudged through 5-foot-high snowdrifts the next day to bring them home. Minnie Freeman of Nebraska also decided to keep her children in her schoolhouse to ride out the storm. As she gathered her students and huddled in a ball to keep warm and kept the fire going, an 80-mile-per-hour wind tore the roof off of the schoolhouse, exposing her and all of her children to the harsh winds and below zero temperatures. In a desperate attempt to save them, she grabbed her children and ran out into the darkness of the blizzard, not knowing if she would be able to save the children. Luckily, she found a nearby house, took shelter from the storm, and she and her students survived. Loie Royce in Plainfield did not have the resources to take shelter in her schoolhouse. She led her 3 children into the blizzard in an attempt to reach her house, which was only 90 yards away. This was a path that she had traveled hundreds of times, but with visibility reduced to 0 and in the blinding and painful wind and ice, she became disoriented. By the time she regained her bearings and entered her house, all 3 of the children had died of hypothermia, and Miss Royce's feet were completely frozen. Both of her feet were later amputated. But the most shocking example of the blizzard comes from Chester Township, Minnesota, where the Baker children, sons and daughters of James Baker, were caught in the blizzard on the way home from school. After the storm had passed, the children were found, with their arms wrapped, still holding each other in a frozen embrace. It was later said that the frozen bodies gave off a metallic sound when touched. For years to come, any large gathering would find many people with amputated limbs, missing ears, missing noses, and missing fingers from frostbite. Though the blizzard resulted in at least 235 deaths, making it the 10th deadliest winter storm on record, the fact that the majority of those that perished were young children on their way home from school makes the children's blizzard the most tragic. This is True Mysteries. Please like, leave comments, and subscribe. Thanks for watching.